So we are going to look at joint injuries for our last skeletal lecture. And the first injury that we're going to talk about is dislocations. This is where a bone that forms a joint becomes detached from that joint. So this is a dislocation of a hip. So normally you can see here, this is where the femur would normally sit down here, but it has actually been pushed up. It is actually sitting behind the ischium. So the reason you can tell that is you can see the line of the ischium here, and it's sitting in front of the femur. And so that's how you can tell that it has been pushed back behind the ischium. The reason I pulled this image of a dislocation is because this is common in car accidents where a person has like put their feet up on the dashboard. That puts so much pressure on the femurs that it pushes them out of the acetabulum. Here is a dislocated shoulder. You can see the dislocation. You can see the humerus is no longer sitting in the glenoid cavity. You can know the humerus is no longer sitting in the glenoid cavity. And the thing about dislocations is that you are more prone to get them once you have one. So usually we can reset the dislocated appendage, and it will take, a couple of days to weeks to heal. And then, but the thing about it is that you have stretched the tendons and ligaments in that joint. And so now you are at a much higher risk for dislocations. So just reminding you about some structures of synovial joints here, or diarthritic joints. Remember the bursa sac, that's going to come into play. But when we have a dislocation, we disrupt all of these tendons and we lose the synovial fluid. So one of the things that they counsel people who had a dislocation to do is to try and not use that appendage until the synovial fluid can be replaced, which usually takes like a couple of days for the body to get that synovial fluid back in place. So just so you can kind of remember, here's the glenoid cavity, here's the head of the humerus. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a dislocation of a shoulder. And then this, the labrum, is a circular ligament, and this is going to be the thing that you have disrupted if you dislocate. And then here are some of the other tendons and ligaments that would also be torn or stretched during a dislocation. And these, because they're not very vascular, take a very long time to heal. And in some cases, they are just permanently stretched out. And this is what makes you more prone to dislocations in the future. So with elbows, I want to talk about bursitis. So I reminded you what a bursa sac looks like, but in an elbow, the bursa sac actually sits outside of the joint and is not protected. And bursitis is a situation where the bursa sac becomes inflamed due to repeated use. It starts to become overstimulated, so it has increased blood supply, and then it becomes swollen, and then it starts becoming very tender to the touch and very painful. And so I just wanted to show you where the bursa sac on the elbow is. You can see it's outside of the joint completely. It is completely unprotected. And this is often a disorder you see with repeated use. This is what is often referred to as tennis elbow, because you're using that joint over and over again so that the bursa sac becomes so inflamed, and then it, like I said, it can become very painful. Just so you remember, a elbow can be dislocated, so I'm just showing you here the tendons and ligaments that would be disrupted during a dislocation of the elbow. And then we are going to talk about sprained ankles. So sprained ankles, these are all of the ligaments here that are stretched during a sprained ankle. These are the ones that would need to repair themselves and be healed if one of them should tear. And then finally, we're going to start talking about arthritis. So arthritis is a situation where the articular cartilage no longer exists. So we're going to use knees as our example. So here is a healthy knee. I want you to look at how smooth the surfaces are here. Here is an arthritic knee. See how we have these pockets of dark spaces and it's all bumpy instead of this beautiful smooth surface? This is because the bone is grinding against each other. And you can even see it here on the patella. You can see how much structure has been lost because of that grinding. So there could be the synovial membranes could be not producing as much fluid, and the articular cartilage has been greatly reduced and in some places completely worn away. So now the bones are grinding against each other and creating these huge divots. And on top of that, what can happen is your bone can start producing scar tissue called a bone spur. And when that happens, now those bone spurs are grinding against each other and you're just having scar tissue on scar tissue grinding, and those bone spurs can actually break off and then float around in the joint and increase pain. So some other things that could happen, you could have a meniscus tear. So the meniscus, you have two. You have the lateral meniscus and the medial meniscus. So if you've ever heard of an LCM or an MMC, those kinds of tears are related to the meniscus and these tendons inside the knee here. Those are going to be really important for the functionality of the knee. And so here's the ACL, and you also have that is that tendon running right or that ligament right there. If you've ever heard of an ACL tear, that is what is torn. And then one of the ways that we can treat arthritis is through joint replacement. So this is a hip replacement, and we're going to actually watch a video in class about hip replacements. So we will be watching that together, and I'll kind of walk through that surgery. But I just kind of wanted to show you what that looks like under X-ray. This is a total hip replacement, whereas this is a partial hip replacement. It has to do with the amount of anatomy that's been replaced. A partial, the neck is still intact, the neck of the femur, whereas in a total, it is replaced by a medical apparatus. And that is going to finish out our articulations notes, and this is the end of our skeletal system notes.